climate change has sparked a global debate, and while long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns can be natural due to changes in the sun's activity or large volcanic eruptions, human activities are reported to be the main driver of climate change, mainly through burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Climate justice has been introduced as a way of finding solutions to the climate crisis, which involves only reducing emissions or protecting the natural world, but also doing so in a way which creates a fairer and more just and equal world in the process. Now, the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, that is Pacja, in partnership with Kenyatta University, opened the third Nairobi Summer School of Climate Justice cohort in Nairobi, Kenya, on Monday, July 3rd, and will be closing on the 15th. That will be on Saturday. Now, tonight, associates of the Climate Justice Group join us in studio for a recap on the 2 weeks campaign on climate justice. The 2 weeks campaign on climate justice. Now, Edon Senyene Ndunobongi is the founder and executive director of BlueGreen Initiative for Sustainable Development, and Oumal Khed Yassin Abdi is an environmental consultant and sustainability professional. All right, welcome to our studios this evening.
Oh, thank you so very much.
I hope I've not butchered your names.
I was actually expecting that part too, because it happens everywhere. But you tried. My name is Ediong Senyene Ndunobong. Good evening from Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay. Maybe you can maybe tell us how you pronounce your name.
Okay, I am Oumal Khed Yassin Abdi from Djibouti, and I'm honored to be with you guys tonight.
All right, welcome to KUTV. So I will want to start with you, Edu. Allow me to call you Edu.
Ediong is fine.
Okay. Yeah. You are the founder and the executive director of BlueGreen Initiative for Sustainable Development. Maybe you can tell us more about BlueGreen and what it does.
Okay, thank you so very much. BlueGreen Initiative for Sustainable Development is a youth-led organization. Mm-hmm. We come to realize that there are so many challenges pertaining to the environment, but what really the problem is lack of knowledge, lack of information, particularly among the young people, because we know that young people without being informed will not know the right actions to take. So we came up with the initiative to see that we train young people on climate education, and also not just training them, we take climate action. And with that, we've been able to, encourage a lot of young persons. There's a project we run in Nigeria where I'm from. Mm-hmm. We call it the Green School Project. Mm-hmm. So we go into schools, primary, secondary schools, and then we train school children on climate change, and of course how they could take action to remediate the problem we are currently facing in the world.
Okay. And for Nairobi Summer School, maybe what role are you playing there? Are you one of the learners? Because I understand it is that cohort. We are in that cohort now.
Yeah, first I must say a very big thank you to Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance for finding it pertinent to gather youth. Yeah. And this time around, not just within the African continent, but across the globe, or the global south, let me put it that way. Yeah, I'm one of the participants. I came here to learn. Mm-hmm. But then as duty calls, I do not just learn, I volunteer to serve in different capacities I deem it necessary, or where I see a need. So I'm here to learn first of all, but then I've been helping out in diverse ways where the chances are available.
Okay. Now, Yassin, what role do you play in Nairobi Summer School? Are you also doing the same thing it does, learning and also volunteering?
Yes, I am so very much doing the learning, and also taking up a few other roles as a volunteer, because I believe that together we go faster. So yes.
Okay, and by the way, you say that you have interest in gender and women's empowerment issues in the context of climate change. Maybe you can tell us about this and maybe the policies that you are pushing for to promote sustainable practices.
Thank you so much for your question. It's actually a very interesting question because gender plays a crucial role in climate change, environmental issues, and in fact in climate justice, because women and children are most oftenly affected by climate change in a very disproportionate way. So they are the one that bear the brunt of climate change's impacts the most. But women are not only victims, they are also change makers. So with that being said, it's really important to understand, first of all, the role that women have in the community as agents of change. Then from there, we can push for their empowerment, socially, economically, and also in an educative aspect, so that they can build their own resilience against climate change. And the different policies that we normally, even back home when I'm involved in community empowerment in the aspect of climate change, the policy that we put forward for women are first of all mainstreaming gender in climate issues, giving them that voice so that they can have their own perspective put into place, enabling them economically, financially, so that they can diversify their own source of income. Because, for example, now, if farmers women are dealing with drought or with water scarcity, which are extreme weather-related impacts, what happens to them is that they lose their own source of livelihood. So what we do there, is to empower them economically through entrepreneurship. Doing so, we are diversifying their source of income. They can not only rely on agricultural produces or their farming products. They can go into how can I say, into selling other stuffs, but then still that's going to bring the money to maintain the households. So yeah.
Okay, so are you saying women are the most affected by climate change?
No, this is one thing that I need to correct. When we're talking about women, when we're talking about gender, we're not referring to women. Gender is about women as well as men, boys and girls. But the issue of the impact of climate change when it comes to women is a disproportionate issue, right? So women are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change in the aspect of, now let me give you an example, right? We all come from, in this context, in the African context, we all come from African communities. So in the African communities, women are caregivers. They provide the food, they go fresh water, they do the cooking and all that, right? So in that perspective, when they are dealing with environmental change that are reducing, their food or their clean water, they are impacted directly, right? Men are also impacted. Men are impacted in ways of if there's no farming to do, they go to the cities, and that's climate migration. So men leave women in rural, especially in rural settings, to go to the cities to look for, to look for jobs, while they leave the woman to tackle the harsh task at home, like farming in very, very, very extreme weather conditions. So if we consider that part, I can say that women are disproportionately impacted by climate change.
Okay.
Yes.
So in this case, we're mostly focusing on the rural woman.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. But when we're speaking about the impact of climate change, the impact of climate change happens everywhere. We're not only focusing on the rural woman. I just took that as an example. But even when you consider urban settings, it's the same impact, right? So in cities and in our rural communities, I can prove to you that I can claim or confirm that women are impacted by climate change more than any other any other member of the society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on, I was checking the meaning of climate justice, and I saw that it entails, ensuring the representation, inclusion, and protection of the rights of those most vulnerable to effects of climate change. Now, perhaps, what is climate justice, just for the sake of maybe the viewer who needs a clear, an elaboration of what climate justice really is? I want to start with you, Edu.
All right, thank you so very much. If it was in Nigeria, I don't know how the pidgin here in Kenya is. I would have loved to put it in pidgin, but I wouldn't want to try that. So let me see how to make it very common, because I wouldn't want to go academics. We are from Africa. I'm from the Niger Delta region in Nigeria, and my state in particular happens to be an oil-producing state, and we've had. For about 56 years now, we've had the presence of Shell, ExxonMobil, and all of those international oil companies, who've been causing serious environmental crisis. So you want to connect. When you're talking about climate justice, you're also referring to environmental justice. And then in environmental justice, there are issues of ecocide, where there are crimes seen against nature by these international oil organizations or oil companies, if you want to put it so. And for instance, in Nigeria, there's a place called the Ororo oil well, where Ororo in Nigeria in Yoruba means oil. And if you go to that place, fire is burning as we speak on a high sea. And so you imagine such a situation. Now, who are the major persons responsible for climate change? Africa contributes just about 4%. There's some narratives that would tell you 6%. That's why I said I don't want to go academics. But if you go to the global north, the Americas, the Europe, and all of those, they are the ones contributing. And now China is even doing the same, contributing more to climate change. And in Africa, for instance, we produce the crude oil, or they extract or exploit the crude oil. Let me not even use extract. They exploit the crude oil and then take it raw to their countries to process, and then bring back the processed product to sell even at a higher cost. They are the ones making the money while we remain perpetually poor, and our environment is being impacted upon. So now the call for climate justice is: you are the highest polluter. You are the one causing the ecocide. You are the one committing crime against nature. You are the one causing us to, have bad air to breathe. Can you pay for this? Bring back, let's start the reparation. Since you are the one causing all of this, you must also take responsibility. So that's the place of the call for climate justice. And now, when you're talking about climate justice, there are so many elements you want to put together. We have the economic justice, we have the social justice, we have so many things you want to put together. So it's simply put, a call for the people who's caused so much damage to nature in Africa, affecting us, the people, to see how, not even see how to commit to, saying that they pay for whatever damage they've caused.
Yeah. What is Yasin? What is your perspective of climate justice?
I totally agree with my colleague. Simply put, for me, climate justice is social justice, right? Because, and it also refers to the equitable distribution of the burdens and the benefit of climate change mitigation and adaptation. That's the generic definition of climate justice, right? But in terms of social justice, climate justice, it's a concept, right, that push forward injustices that are happening in our societies in the aspect of environmental changes. So, for example, if you have a polluted land, the people who inhabit that specific area are, because they don't have the means, or because they don't have the right representation, legal representation, or because they don't have that kind of voice to go outside and, push those people polluting their own land. In that aspect, what is happening to the people there? It's inequality, it's injustice, because they don't have their say. They don't know how whatever is happening around them, sometimes discussed as development project, is going to impact their lives and the lives of their generations. So for me, climate justice is simply social justice. When you tackle issues of social inequalities, you are in the same time, correcting what has gone wrong environmentally. So yeah.
Okay, and by the way, it is the youth mostly who are being, involved in the fight for climate justice. For instance, even in the Nairobi Summer School, most of the people in these cohorts are the young people. Yeah. So how is the fight for climate justice relevant for the youth? I want to start with you, Edu.
Okay, thank you. Like I had said, young people, it's just like when you were asking my colleague about the gender roles, and she talked about the vulnerability of women and children. And you look at the time, if you look at the, how do I put it, the time clock or the clock for humanity, the old guys are already phasing out. And when you're talking about sustainability, you're talking about the future. And who are the future? It is the young people. And there are reports that I think that the current set of young people, by the time most of them get into their late 20s, that about 100 million of them would have gone into extreme poverty as a result of climate change. And there are even scarier reports that about 20% of the global population of young people, particularly in Africa, will be forced into climate-induced migration. And so you see, with this report, and of course they are scientific, and scientific reports do not just come by say or hearsay. It's after intense effort to see that they prove their onions, and of course get to know exactly what it is that they come up with these publications or data. So if as a young person and you are coming through with this, or you're coming across this report, you're seeing them, you're reading them, and you do not get into action, I don't know what you'll be waiting for. I don't know what will inspire to take action. The old people have done their part. So the young people must, and of course the movement has already begun. So it's incumbent on the young people to say that they get involved. Do not sit on the fence. Get involved. Demand. Get knowledge first. And that is why when we as an opener, I had to give my gratitude to Pacja and then the KU for gathering us to impact us with knowledge. So as young people in Africa particularly, and of course the other part of the global north, you should gain relevant knowledge to see that you get involved in the movement. Because if we do not get it right, I wonder what we bequeath to the next generation. Because as Christians, we talk about rapture and all of that. But what if rapture does not happen and you have to bequeath a failing environment to your children or even your children's children? So it's a call for everyone, young people, the old people have done their part. As a young person, wherever you are, in Africa, in the global south, and by the way, global south are those countries that are less developed. We have the least developed country, we have the developing countries, and so those are the countries that have been addressed to be the global south, and Africa is leading in that context. So if you are from the global south, and particularly Africa, please, as a young person, you must rise to the movement. This movement is actually very important to us as young people. We do not need to sit in the fence. We need to act. And the time to act is now. It would have been yesterday, but yesterday is bygone. The time to act is now.
Right.
Yeah, but Yasin, when you look at this, in the leadership, people in the leadership, old people, are the youth being empowered enough to fight climate change?
Before I answer that question, I want to remind our viewers and everybody here that most movement in Africa, the one that we're fighting for independence, the one that we're fighting for social justices and all that, were carried out by youth. Nkrumah of Ghana was young, Nyerere of Tanzania was young, and Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso was young when they were fighting for a just cause. Yeah. So the reason why youth is being emphasized when it comes to climate justice is because they have a voice and a representation. which they can use to push forward what is happening in our own society, in our own communities. Yes, they are not, we can say that youth need capacity building, that's true, but youth of nowadays are very, very, very learned. They're smart, they are innovative, they have fresh initiatives and fresh ideas, right? So I think they are well equipped to go against social inequalities and climate injustices. So when we are talking about their main, how can I say, the main role in whatever is happening in the climate justice realm, we can also mention the impact they have on mobilization and activism. Youth mobilize more than any other age, how can I say,
age bracket?
Yeah, age bracket of the society. They do the most of the activism because why? They have that time, they have the energy, and they have the voice. So when you put all these aspects all together, coupled with their own expertise and the knowledge that they have, I think there is no one better than you to carry out climate justice. If policymakers or people in governmental institutions do not want to build the capacity of the youth is no more waiting. We are no more waiting for anybody. We are doing our own capacity building. We are going to look for the knowledge. We are going to assess, to access whatever is missing so that we can, refine our voice in a way that we can deal with the big players. And thanks to the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, that's what is being done now in the summer in the Nairobi Summer School, building youth capacity in matters pertaining on environmental issues, negotiation, climate justice, and advocacy. So yes.
Okay, there is an issue I wanted to talk about just before. We're actually running out of time, but I wanted us to talk about something here. There are the leading nations that are actually leading in, greenhouse gas emissions, and they're all outside Africa: China, USA, India, European Union, Indonesia, Russia, and Brazil. As of 2020, they accounted for half of all global greenhouse gas emissions. But Africa suffers more. Maybe why do you think that is the case? And, it is said that in the coming years, they are likely to be refugees. I mean, the climate change refugees. And people are actually being asked to, switch from fossil fuel, use of coal, oil, and gas to using renewable solar, renewables like solar or wind. But how is it really easy to adjust to this new culture? I want to begin with you, Edu.
Okay, so we are talking about just transition. That's what you would have, said simply put. We're talking about just transition, and by transitioning, you mean it's a process. So it's not just a wonder thing where you wake up and then you implement. No, it takes time. And there is a narrative by the global north where. And by the global north, I mean those big nations you've mentioned, a couple of them, that we in Africa, we should reserve our forest, and then women should not go to the farm or to the forest to take dead wood to cook with. I understand that these processes, causes emission, what's it called, CO2. And then, which is actually the primary gas that is responsible for global warming. But if you want to go by what they do over there, and the woman going into the bush to get firewood to prepare meal for herself and the household, the effect is very minimal. It's very minimal. So you see, the richer wants to keep being rich. But again, we need to transition. The Bible, I like referring to the Bible. The Bible says, will we continue in sin so that grace may abound? So being that we also have, we were expecting to transition up, but then we are not contributing much, does not mean we should not transition. So what do we need? It's very possible, though there are costs to it. And then we'll talk about loss and damage. and loss of damages come and pay for what you've cost. So if this money comes, and we are talking about adaptation here too, if this money comes, then we push it into, and then, the global north is still trying to push some narrative, talking about they make the funding come in form of loan. But we say no, it shouldn't be loan, it should come as grant. So if this funding comes, these are ways we could just transition and then see how we could, adapt to the new trends. And one of the things we push against is, we were talking about plantation agriculture and all of those. And then do not, and they come with grabbing, that's what I wanted to say, land grabbing. So do not come with your ideas, and then you want to grab our lands, and then the problem, see, why trying to solve a particular problem, you're creating more problems. So it's possible for us to transition to renewables. I encourage everyone, and of course it's already here. I know in your house you have a rechargeable torch, where you can see that little solar panels every day. So those are the processes. And then we have clean cooking stoves now that you can cook with less emission. And we're talking about the electric vehicles. And there's something again that I noticed when I came into Kenya, that there are no plastics, nylons. You understand? So those are the steps. So all of these things put together are quite possible. So it's possible for us to transition, and just at the cost. Maybe a bit expensive, but it's possible.
Okay. Yasin?
So I would want to come in. Before we speak on just transitions, it's really important to understand, why are we talking about climate justice? Or when did this start? This sort of injustice, what is the root cause of it, right? If we go back in the history, we have two main enablers of the climate justice, which are the colonization and the industrial revolution. So the colonizers came to settle in Africa, taking the natural resources and keeping the indigenous or the local communities in poverty, while they are going back to their countries and producing, manufacturing, and industrially developing their own countries. So to moving forward, green gas emissions have been emitting. For example, the U.S. has been emitting greenhouse gas for the past 100 years. This is not something that is happening now. It has already happened, right? So when we are talking about just transition, who has to transition? Who has to change their ways? Is it Africa that is only emitting 4% of greenhouse gas emissions? Or is it the West that has been polluting the planet, for the past for the past century, right? So when we are pushing forward the climate justice in an African perspective, we need to be very careful, because these people are coming to impose us what they want us to do. But what do we need? We need climate justice. When do we need it? We need it right about now. Right? They are telling us that we should reduce our agricultural practices that are emitting greenhouse gas emission. In scientific studies, if you go and check about that, the energy sector is the bigger emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. In that aspect, that's what the West has been doing, right? So we need to direct the conversation in accordingly to where they belong. It's good to transition. It's good to use sustainable and green energy, right? But to who? What we need in Africa now is not mitigation. It's adaptation. We need to adapt to the impact of climate change. They need to mitigate, because they are the one emitting the most. In Africa, and especially in the global south, in small island states, what we need is to build our infrastructures and our capacities to build the resilience that we need to protect ourselves from the impact of climate change. So when we are asking these questions of the just transitions and all that, we shouldn't just be running with the narrative coming from the West. We need to know what is specifically working for our own communities and push forward our own strategies.